Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden, breaking down tonight's 10-game NBA slate. A pretty good slate. A couple injuries that we will need to keep an eye on throughout the day. But overall, I mean, a lot less cluttered, I feel like, over the last couple of days with all their injuries.
Yeah, there's obviously a few to keep an eye on. As of right now, not as many as the past few days, so that's kind of nice. But it is the NBA. There are a bunch of coaches that are making terrible decisions as of late, and guys that could just be ruled out just for the hell of it. So definitely still have to kind of keep an eye on some things, but not at. Hopefully, it won't be as hectic as the past week or so.
As of late, I mean, you're talking like it's just a new coming thing.
That's true. I mean, I I don't know. Like last season, it wasn't as bad until late in the season. This year, it's been kind of all season long. I think some of that has to do with just the shortened off season.
Yeah, no, that's true. Let's dive into it here. 10 games, OKC, Orlando, 212 total. Obviously, a game that you and I both have a lot of interest in, especially on the OKC side, just because it's such a great matchup for all three of their big guys, and really all four, because Steven Adams is also in play.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about the Oklahoma City side with the Magic. I mean, they've just been terrible recently. They're lost, I believe, 9 straight games, and they've allowed 117.4 points per game during that slide. So, uh, areas you can attack with pretty much all the Thunder starting five. Maybe not Robertson, but definitely a good spot to start.
Yeah, and looking at Westbrook, obviously he comes in pretty much as a top option for me on the board tonight. I just think, one, he's kind of still too cheap for Westbrook, especially in this spot. Plenty enough value on this slate that you can fit him in and have a pretty comfortable lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he's got what, 2 triple doubles in his last 4 games. I think he fell an assist shy in the other 2 games. He still has a massive usage rate. He's still doing a lot for this offense, and obviously, it's a great matchup against a Magic team that struggles to defend point guards. We were talking before we started recording. Over the last 3 seasons and 4 games, Russ does not have a game under 76 fantasy points against the Magic. One of those games had Durant, so we can kind of throw that whole argument out the window. I want to get Russ and Harden in my lineups tonight. We'll obviously discuss Harden later, but at a point guard position where there's not a ton to like at the top, it's kind of tough to consider fading Russ here. And if he continues to perform like he has, he's still not expensive enough.
No, I don't think so either. And when you look at some of the other guys, I mean, small forward, fairly weak tonight. We don't have a Giannis, we don't have a LeBron. Durant's in question. So I think it kind of defaults to Paul George being an option you can pay up for. I see it kind of more of as a tournament move. I don't mind him in cash games, but I just think at that price tag, it gives your lineup a little bit of different lineup construction when you go with George.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're just looking minutes wise, his minutes have been there. He has 2 games of 40 minutes in the past 4. He has several over the past 10 where he's over at 40 or more minutes. The thing that I think I'm most interested in with Paul George, especially on FanDuel, is the fact that he has at least 4 steals in 5 of the last 10 games. Magic giving up 8.2 steals per game to opponents. That gives him a pretty solid boost to his floor. He's 8,600 on DraftKings. He's 8,600 on FanDuel as well. Like, that's a pretty solid price for a guy that has 45, 50 point upside in a matchup like this.
Yeah, definitely. We look at Carmelo Anthony. I like him quite a bit over on FanDuel, 6,200, 7K on DraftKings. Not bad, but not quite the discount. As FanDuel, he's a guy who's been right around a fantasy point per minute player this year. Averaging right around 32 minutes. Not quite as high as the other two guys, but I mean, 27% usage rate. He's probably a guy you're going to find around 30, 35 fantasy points tonight. Like, I'll take that on FanDuel for 6,200.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something to note with the Magic, they are a team that struggles to defend players in isolation. They're allowing on isolation plays are allowing players to score 47% of the time, average 0.97 points per possession. We know Melo is is an isolation player. He's not extremely efficient, but he is averaging 0.83 points per possession. He's operating in isolation 26% of the time. So this is a spot where you could expect him to put up a big game. And again, I think all 3 of the big 3 for Oklahoma City are in play. I think you could use 2 of them and feel pretty confident that they're going to pay off their salaries.
Yep. Then we get to Steven Adams, of course, who's the cheaper of the group. Great spot for him. Orlando bottom 5 rebounding, bottom 5 in defensive efficiency against centers. A great rebound spot for Adams here.
It really is. I told you before we started recording, like I hate saying someone's a lock and load for me, but like Adams is pretty darn close to being a guy that I'm just locking in my lineups at center and moving on. Too cheap for the upside he has. The Orlando Magic really can't rebound. They are giving up 46.6 per game. They're giving up almost 50 points in the paint to opponents. Adams is second in the NBA in paint touches per game at 11.3. He's averaging almost 10 points in the paint per game. They struggle against rollmen as well. Like, this is just a spot where Adams comes out and could just absolutely smash. And in the mid 5K range, like, it would be tough for him to not pay off that salary, especially if you're going to see him over 30 minutes tonight.
Yep, definitely. I'm near Orlando, so usually when I get fired up about one team, I want to someone else on the other team, and just in correlation, I kind of have a hard time going with this Orlando team just because, one, it's not a great matchup for really any of these guys. Minutes are still volatile. Like I don't know how much I like Orlando despite a close spread game that's going to be high scoring.
Yeah, it is really tough to kind of narrow down where you want to go. I think Elfrid is interesting in GPPs at his price, 5,900 on DraftKings. That's still a little too cheap for the upside he has. He's up to 73 on FanDuel. Like, I'm not paying that price on FanDuel for Elfrid. I definitely don't mind doing that on DraftKings, though. Simmons in the starting lineup is a little bit interesting. He's still fairly cheap across the industry. I don't mind going there. Other than that, maybe take a flyer on Fournier, and that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, like tough spot for the bigs. Like I don't have a lot of interest in Gordon or Vooch here.
No, I don't really either. Like the Thunder, an excellent defense, excellent defending in the paint, excellent defending at the rim. So not really interested in those guys.
Yeah. Phoenix Detroit next one here, 218 total. Detroit 12-point favorites. Phoenix on the back-to-back here. Pretty tough spot for them. Detroit's been pretty good defensively. I don't have a lot of interest in this Phoenix side, actually, really across the board.
Yeah, I don't really either. I think there's a couple things we probably should discuss. First of all, it is a back-to-back, so we could see Tyson Chandler sit or play fewer minutes. There's honestly no telling what the hell Jay Triano is doing with his rotations. I believe Greg Monroe didn't even see the floor last night. It was all pretty much Alex Lynn and Tyson Chandler. If Chandler sits and you see Greg Monroe get the starter, get extra minutes, it is a revenge game for him against Detroit. I believe I think he's scored in at least 40 fantasy points in every matchup against Detroit over the past couple seasons. That's something to keep an eye on, though. Like, I don't have interest in Monroe unless we get news that he's going to start or see some minutes or anything like that, because you just can't trust the minutes there.
Yeah, really. Yeah. What were you saying?
I was gonna say, like, I'm not on Devin Booker tonight. Like, going up against Avery Bradley, that's just a no for me.
Yeah, I was heading the same way, and just TJ Warren in a tough spot. I just have more interest even on the Detroit side, and probably on the Detroit side more in GPPs, because I do think there is some blowout concern in this one.
Yeah, there really is. Like, I disagree with Warren. I think this is a decent spot for him. Like, if you expect Bradley to lock down Booker, like, offense has to flow through somebody, and it's not going to be Dragon Bender and Marquise Chris. It's probably not going to be Tyler Ulis and Mike James. Like, I think Warren's the guy, and I know Stanley Johnson is a decent defender, but they've been pretty bad against small forwards as far as efficiency goes. So I don't mind the spot here for Warren.
On the Detroit side of things, I mean, for me, I like Tobias Harris again here tonight. He's kind of fairly cheap. I mean, 6,500 on DK, 67, 115 total there for Detroit. Like, I'm okay with using him at Avery Bradley at their price tags. Drummond in a GPP, I'm also cool with. So, like, I'm more than okay with using Detroit in these spots.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pace-up spot for Detroit going against a terrible defense. The Suns they're giving up 115.9 points per game, and that was before last night's Bulls game when I pulled that statistic. But part of my research process for breaking down a slate is I go look at how each team performs against play types, so isolation and transition against ball handlers, things like that. And then I look at the top players on the team in those situations. Tobias stands out. I mean, he's the best team. He's the best on the team in isolation. He's the best on the team in transition. He's the best on the team as a pick and roll ball handler. He's the best on the team on post ups. And all these areas are areas where Phoenix really struggles. So you don't have to sell me on Tobias. You know, I'm a Tobias Harris truther. Like, I almost wrote him up in the GPP article today, but I decided not to because it seems like every time I do, he flops. So I absolutely love him tonight. Him and one other guy in that kind of mid range that we'll get to later, I think are excellent options.
In the backcourt, I mean, Reggie Jackson continues to not really see enough minutes for me to feel great about plugging him in. This could also be one of those random Ish Smith games. Like, it just kind of feels like that. I don't have really a preference between the two. I just think I'm kind of staying away, even though it's a great spot.
I actually wrote up Reggie Jackson in the GPP article. It is interesting to note, I think the last time he saw 30 minutes, I actually have his game log here. The last time he saw at least 30 minutes was October 28th. So that was game 6 of the season. This will be their 20th game of the season. I know he's not seeing a bunch of minutes, but if you're getting 30 minutes of Reggie Jackson against Phoenix, one of the worst teams in the NBA, defensively, they're giving up the most points per game to point guards. He's 5,900 on DraftKings. That's really, really cheap. He's 5,800 on FanDuel. He needs, 32, 35 fantasy points to pay off that salary? That's easily reachable in this matchup. I mean, we saw him 28 minutes, 33 fantasy points against Boston. Like, that's a terrible matchup. Like, we know he has that ceiling. Like, I think he's worth a shot here.
Anyone else on the Detroit side? Boban?
Boban. I'd love to get some Boban. I mean, I don't mind Drummond, obviously. It's a good spot for him, but I don't know that I can pay that price for him.
No. Next one here, you got Washington and Philly, 213 total. This one, obviously we're going to have to keep an eye on the Ben Simmons news. That's kind of a bigger thing for tonight's slate. We know obviously about John Wall, and I think we got kind of a pretty good distinguished outlook of the rotation that Tim Frazier is probably not going to be a guy to play anymore moving forward.
Yeah, he was just so bad last night. And some of that, I guess, could be attributed to Tyus Jones and the Minnesota defense. Like, Tyus Jones isn't actually a pretty decent defender. But, I mean, he didn't even play. I think he left with 4 minutes to go and in the third quarter, didn't even play the rest of the game. He was not in the game for for the majority of the game. Like, he was just terrible. I don't want to go back to that well tonight. Like, there's so many other places you can go. Like, there's no reason to look at Tim Frazier. And it's sad now that we say that he's probably going to go off, but I just don't want to do that. No, I was telling you beforehand, I think Tomas Satoransky actually could usurp him in the starting lineup and would be a much better play at mid salary across the industry.
Yeah, I think so too. And you mentioned the defense last night. I mean, he had no issue moving the ball and producing fantasy points.
Yeah, but he's probably a little bit better than Tim Frazier.
Oh, yeah. On the Washington side, obviously Bradley Beal struggled last night. This is a good rebound spot for him. Usage, obviously through the roof without Wall. I'm okay going back to the well there.
Yeah, I am too. I do have a little concern that maybe they try to throw Robert Covington at him, which could end up hurting him a little bit. But with that usage rate, I mean, it's really tough to overlook. And the minutes are going to be there for him. They're not going to bench him in this spot. He's going to be on the floor for the majority of the game. He's basically the primary ball handler against Philly. It's really, really tough to overlook him, and people aren't going to go there. I'm sure some people will, but people are going to look at him and see that game last night and be like, man, I don't want to play Bradley Beal again. So it's a good spot to jump on board and hope he bounces back.
Yep. Guys like Otto Porter, Markieff Morris. I mean, obviously Porter had a decent night, 30 fantasy points. Obviously at his price tags, I think that's fair. A decent spot again here. I'm fine going back with Porter too.
Yeah, I'm fine going back to the well with Porter, and I'm even going to go back to the well in a couple lineups with Markieff. I know he crapped the bed last night, but I still think he has the ability to break out, and I think this is a spot where I'd be willing to go back to the well there.
Yeah, there's one area where I would like to go back to the well. I don't know if I am. It's Gortat. Let me down, man. He always lets me down. It's a good spot here. I mean, Philly 23rd defensive efficiency against centers. Like Gortat in this spot can do some damage. He's done well against Philly in the past. Uh, at his price tags, I think he's still worth the look in GPPs.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, like, it's not like he was terrible. He put up 19 fantasy points in 20 minutes. It's just he didn't get the minutes. With this being a back-to-back, you might think Jan Mahimi maybe gets a few less minutes. But if we get any indication from Scott Brooks that they might, roll that second unit a little bit more, Jan Mahimi becomes a little bit interesting at his price tag.
Yeah, and with that being said, too, I mean, does Zubre have any interest in your lineups tonight?
I think so. Like, I mean, I wouldn't mind going back there. I mean, his price is up a little bit. He's at 4,200. I mean, the minutes have been solid for him. Like, he's 25, 23, 23. I mean, a few of these games, he's played decent amount of minutes. Like, if they go small without Simmons on the other side, like, I don't necessarily mind it.
No, I mean he's been above 20 fantasy points in three of the last four games. Like he's put up a couple 30 over the last 10. I think at his price tags he's fairly interesting because, like you said, the mitts have been there. And if they roll a little bit more smaller, I mean Oubre is a decent small forward option. I think, especially on FanDuel where you got a roster too.
Yeah, he's fine. I don't think you obviously can't go there in cash games, but if you're looking for someone to kind of differentiate in GPPs, he's a guy you could target.
Yep. Anyone else on Washington there?
No, no.
On the Philly side, if Simmons sits, obviously I think TJ McConnell's a guy I'll have a lot of interest in. You saw him play really well when Simmons sat out last time. McConnell's always been a decent guy to kind of plug in when he's getting the opportunity. So I think he would become really a top value for me if Simmons does sit.
Yeah, same thing for me. Anytime I'm going to get McConnell under like 5,200, like I'm going to take that. Let me see what his price is on. Whew, wow. FanDuel, he's 6,400. What are you doing? Okay, so DraftKings specific, McConnell's in play if Simmons sits out. Like, even in this matchup, like I don't know if I can pay that price on FanDuel. That's just absolutely insane. Like, I man, I can't go there on FanDuel. Like, even if Simmons sits, like I can't do it.
See, I can still go there. Like I have no issue with McConnell. I mean, we've seen decent games when he plays, upper 20s, 30 minutes. I mean, decent spot for him here. Like, I don't know. I guess I don't have an issue with it kind of with the guys in the range. I know like Dennis Smith against Brooklyn in that same price range or cheaper makes it tough. Um, that's probably the one area that is a little bit gray.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, like, I know he performed really well last time Simmons sat out, but I mean, he only has a 19% or 16% usage rate without Simmons on the floor, but he's averaging like 0.99 fantasy points per minute. Um, man, like, God, that's sticker shock. Like, man, I mean, I guess like cash game, sure, but like, I don't see him having a huge ceiling here at that price at that price tag on FanDuel.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you have Dennis Smith at 5,800. You have Reggie Jackson 5,800. I mean, I definitely can see there's plenty of other options. You have Dragic, who's a couple hundred more, like 69. Like I guess there's guys in that range as far as DraftKings where that's really the glaring value.
Yeah, it really is.
So, as far as the other Philly guys go, I love Robert Covington tonight, kind of either way, if Simmons plays or doesn't. Good spot for him. You obviously mentioned to me before the show, we do need to keep an eye on him just because he's dealing with some issues, had a death close to him. We've seen that kind of happen a few times. We saw it with Jaylen Brown where he sat out one of the games for a funeral.
Yeah, it's news to keep an eye on. Obviously, I think he found out like a few minutes before the game last time out, and you could obviously tell it affected him. I mean, he went 1 from 11 from the floor, 0 for 9 from 3. Just news to monitor. If he suits up, like I do have a lot of interest in him, regardless of Simmons' status. JJ Redick is extremely interesting, regardless of Simmons' status. I mean, he's just been outstanding. The minutes are like ridiculously high for him. I mean, 36 last game, 33, 31, 32. We've seen him, rack up assists. He's scoring really well. So I do have a lot of interest in him. And then, of course, Joel Embiid. Like, if Simmons sits out, Joel Embiid and his 38% usage rate, just way too high to ignore. Like, I know his price is up there, but that's a really tough fade, especially in this matchup.
Yeah, it really is. Dario Saric, I have some interest in as well tonight. Still fairly cheap. A guy who can plug in is still getting reasonable minutes. Even if Simmons, plays, I still have interest in Saric as well.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind that play either. 5K on DraftKings, still a little too cheap. I mean, he's 57 on FanDuel, so not terribly overpriced there. I definitely don't mind Saric.
Anyone else from that game?
No.
You had to think about it.
I was sitting here thinking like maybe Luwawu, Cabarro if Simmons sits out, but man, I don't want to chase waterfalls tonight.
Miami, New York, 201 total, one of the lower ones on the slate. I know you and I really don't have a ton of interest. Just kind of a tough matchup. I mean, a lot of these guys I have more interest in the bigs, and these are just two teams that I don't really like to attack with them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make this game pretty simple. Dragic is a fine GPP option. Tim Hardaway Jr., obviously an excellent GPP option. And like this could be an excellent spot for Hassan Whiteside if you think he's going to get the minutes. But as we mentioned yesterday, and it came to fruition, like his minutes way up and down. So like I don't know that I want to target that in anything other than GPPs.
Yep, I'm with you. I think Dragic's fine. Probably more of a play for me on FanDuel where he's 6,900 compared to 76 on DraftKings. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Dragic's an excellent GPP play.
Yep.
So, New York side, obviously, nothing really for you. No Porzingis, no Cantor tonight.
Just a little Tim Hardaway, and that's it.
All righty, let's move on here. Charlotte, Toronto. We're getting to MCW here. Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Bad. You're staying quiet. You got to say something here.
MCW Chalk Day tilts me like no other. Like MCW Chalk Day is almost as bad as Jeff Green Chalk Day. Like we already know Kemba's ruled out. MCW is going to get the start. MCW is terrible at basketball. I don't mind it in cash games. FanDuel, no way I'm touching him, regardless of the format. DraftKings, he's a little bit cheaper. You could consider going there, but I am 100% okay fading Michael Carter Williams tonight in all formats. Like this dude is terrible. We talked about it prior to recording. I think there were 4 games out of the 19 he started last year where he even eclipsed 30 fantasy points. Like I'm not afraid of fading Michael Carter Williams. Like he's not going to break the slate tonight. There's no guarantee he's even going to play more than 20, 22 minutes. So he's a hard pass for me.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'd much rather take some surrounding options of, Nicholas Batum, Jeremy Lamb. I really do think that this could be a spot where, if Malik Monk really does play well behind in MCW struggles or gets some foul trouble, that he comes out and kind of puts up a decent outing, especially at a cheaper price tag. So I actually don't mind him in GPPs at all.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm leaning as well. Like I think Lamb is interesting. Malik Monk in GPPs, both those guys are GPP viable. Batum's fine. Like I don't mind that price. He's 5,800 on DraftKings. I know he's been bad the past 2 games. Tough matchup against San Antonio. Only played 14 minutes against Washington, but a couple games before that, over 30 fantasy points. First game back from injury against Cleveland, had over 30 fantasy points. 5,800 on DraftKings, like that's a fair price for him, and I don't mind going to the well there. He's 5,800 on FanDuel too, which is surprising. So he's a guy that I do have some interest in. Yeah, it's Batum in cash, Monk, Lamb in GPPs, and I'm fading Carter Williams.
Yep. As far as front court guys, do you have any interest?
I mentioned beforehand, Dwight does have a little bit of a narrative here. He needs 25 rebounds to pass Paul Silas, and on the all-time rebounding list, it would move him into 21st, and then he needs 27 to move ahead of Dikembe Mutombo. So, I mean, I don't see him getting that many rebounds tonight, but hey, if you're on the narrative street, why not?
I mean, he does have 5 straight games with double-digit rebounds. I mean, 5 straight double-doubles. He's been incredible, and he keeps having these dud games like once every 5 that keeps his salary seemingly in this low 7 range. Like, he's always cheap.
Yeah, he really is. And like, I mean, he has massive upside. Like, he could be a guy that could win you a GPP if you have him. And it's interesting to note without Kemba Walker on the floor, it's like a 30, 40-minute sample size, 27% usage rate, 1.26 fantasy points per minute. It's pretty darn solid production, like 27% usage rate out of a guy that operates primarily in the, like, only in the paint and at the rim against a team that's not great rim protecting. I don't mind going there tonight.
No, I don't either. You have any interest in anyone else of Marvin Williams, Kate Gilchrist at all?
No, not really.
Yeah. On the Toronto side of things, love Kyle Lowry tonight. Decent spot for him. He's really picked up his play of late. I don't mind kind of continuing to ride him, even at higher price tags. I mean, 82 on FanDuel, 78 on DK is not all that bad.
No, like, I think he's an excellent option. 3 straight games where he's notched double-digit rebounds. That's really promising to see. He pulled down 13 against Atlanta in 27 minutes. Obviously, we know Atlanta's a terrible rebounding team. Charlotte is not. So I wouldn't expect him to continue the trend of getting, double-digit rebounds, but his scoring is up, his usage is up. It is a great spot for him. And like, I'm not worried about Michael Carter-Williams on defense, like not worried about that. So I do like Kyle Lowry a lot here, and probably in all formats. Like, I don't mind using him in cash. I think he's an excellent GPP option.
Yeah. DeMar DeRozan, any interest tonight? I mean, 7,100 on FanDuel is kind of intriguing. Like, that's a really drop-down price for DeRozan.
Yeah, he's coming off a couple bad games. 3 straight bad games. Like, you would expect his ownership to probably take a tumble in the same direction that his scoring average has taken over the past few weeks, but still shooting like 47% from the floor. He's assisting a lot more, which is nice to see. I definitely don't mind him in GPPs. Like, you don't want to go there in cash because he has a pretty low floor, but I mean, he also has 48, 50 fantasy point upside here.
Yeah, like, I think he's an excellent GPP option. I don't really have a lot of interest in anyone else on Toronto. Once again, the kind of rotating front court guys, in this spot, I'm not really appealed with them.
I actually have a decent amount of interest in Pascal Siakam. Like, he's just been outstanding recently. Minutes, even before the blowout against Atlanta, were trending upwards. 31, 29, he had 22 against Indiana, 31 against Atlanta. Some of these games obviously filled in for injuries, but like over 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 of the last 5. So like, he's a guy, he's 3,800 on DraftKings. He's still really cheap. Well, not cheap on FanDuel. No surprise there. He's 5,200. So DraftKings specific play there. Like, I do like Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, you're not getting discounts on FanDuel. There's no such thing as a discount on FanDuel.
Yeah, FanDuel's pricing algorithm is a little off. We'll just say that.
Anyone else from Toronto?
Maybe a flyer on Norman Powell if we get news that DeMar DeRozan sits.
Minnesota, New Orleans here, 218 total. A game with really just a ton of superstars, a ton of high-priced studs on this slate. We obviously had the one-game sample from earlier this year. Cousins, absolutely went to town that night. This is an interesting one. I think this is obviously a game that could go a number of ways, and this one can change the slate depending on what superstar kind of comes out on top.
Yeah, he really took it to Towns in that first game. I mean, he had 35 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, and 6 steals the first time these two teams met. 71 fantasy points. Like, it is interesting to note that the minutes have been way down for Cousins recently. Obviously, starting with the Oklahoma City game where he got ejected, 32 minutes against San Antonio in what ended up being like a 17-point blowout at the end. 30 minutes against Phoenix in a blowout, Golden State's blowout. I would expect those numbers to go back up, but it is just something to keep an eye on. Like I mentioned a few weeks back that Alvin Gentry had talked about not wanting to continue to play Davis and Cousins 40-plus minutes a night. So still in an excellent spot against Minnesota, against Towns' defense. I think there's a couple guys that I'd rather pay for in that price range, but like you can't deny that Towns and Davis both are just excellent spots tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that really stops me from paying them is just basically the price tags. Like, it's nothing about the matchup. It's just basically, do I want to go Westbrook or do I want to kind of go with the Cousins or Davis? I think in GPPs, you obviously can make the case for those two. So I'm more than okay with it. On the other, as far as other New Orleans guys go, I don't have a ton of interest. I know Rondo's still cheap. He's playing reasonable minutes, but nothing that's kind of going to get me excited, especially given the fact that there's still quite a bit of value point guards on the slate.
Yeah, you have to imagine, especially with the Timberwolves with Jimmy Butler there, that he's going to be locking down. He's probably going to be focused on like trying to lock down Jrue Holiday, which would open up some scoring for Rondo. So 4,900 on DraftKings is a decent price for him. I definitely don't mind going there. He's 48 on FanDuel. That's a pretty appealing price tag there. So I don't mind it. Like the minutes start to trend upwards once some of these games stay closer. So I think you can go there. Darius Miller is a cheap option that I do have a little bit of interest in. If Dante Cunningham misses this game, you'll see Darius Miller play some extra minutes. And as was the case with Tobias Harris earlier, whenever I do my research and look at how some of the big weaknesses against specific play types, Darius Miller stands out as a guy that can really attack the Timberwolves with some of their weaknesses, especially against spot up shooters and in transition. So you would expect with if Cunningham sits that he might get a few extra minutes, and I would have a little bit of interest as a cheap option.
Certainly. And I guess if you did have to pick between Cousins or Davis tonight, which one are you rolling with?
Cousins.
Yeah, me too. On the Minnesota side here, obviously on the back-to-back, as far as guys go here, I mean, I kind of like Jimmy Butler in the spots. Played well last night. I don't think he's going to be incredibly high owned on the slate in small forwards. Really not all that appealing, I guess, depending on where you're looking at what site.
I love Jimmy Butler in the spot. Just an excellent matchup across the board. We saw him the last time these two teams faced. Shot the ball 18 times, put up 36 fantasy points, had a few steals. Didn't really have anything else going for him, but it is an excellent spot for Jimmy Butler, and in a position that's really kind of tough to pay up for, or find decent options here. I don't mind going there. I think the Jeff Teague news is going to play a pretty big role in how we attack this game. We saw him sit out last night. Tyus Jones, of course, went off again, 12 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Didn't have 7 steals, but I think he's definitely in play if we get news that Teague is going to sit out again. Like I think he can target Tyus Jones.
Yeah, still 4,500 on DraftKings, 53 on FanDuel. And the fact that he didn't get the steals and still had a 30 fantasy point floor, like that's obviously very encouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, 39 and 40 minutes in the last 2 games. He had 33 in the game against Miami whenever he didn't get the start. Like, they're just going to ride him, like, because they know, like, Aaron Brooks is terrible, and Aaron Brooks sucks at basketball and can't really do anything. So, Tyus Jones would be a guy that I would pretty much lock in if we get news that Teague sits. Like, he warmed up and was pretty close to playing. It is a back-to-back. So maybe they just decide to sit him again tonight. It's a tough read. I hope we get some clarity. That's a 7 p.m. Central Time tip, so an hour after lock. We may not get that news in time, so I wouldn't mind if you're building a bunch of lineups taking a flyer on Tyus Jones in a few.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of going to be like last night, we didn't get that news till after lock, and you just basically, if you're playing multiple lineups, you toss a few in and just hope that he sits, because those 30 minutes where you see him on the court and you see the pictures of him like rolling his ankle around, I mean, that's gonna be what you're looking for.
Yep.
So, anyone else on the Minnesota side? Do you have interest in Towns or Gibson or Wiggins at all?
Man, it's really tough to fade Gibson. Like the minutes he's playing, he played 41 last night, 37, 37, 40. Like Bielitsa probably not coming back tonight. Like it's a decent spot for Gibson at his price, but man, at one of these points with these minutes that he's playing, you expect him to just like pass out on the floor. Like he's old, like, and he's out there running for 40 minutes a night, and that's still a solid cash game option at his price.
Yeah, it is hard to ignore him. His production, I mean, a relatively good floor, right around 20, 22 fantasy points. So, yeah, cash games, I'm definitely cool with him. He's still really cheap. DK, he's kind of getting up there for me. 5,900 is a little bit steep.
Yeah, I still like a cash game guy. Like I don't think he has the upside to pay off like for GPPs, but I mean last time out he had 34 minutes, 33 fantasy points. So like we still know he has a pretty solid floor in this matchup.
Yep. Wiggins Town, any interest there?
Wiggins, if Teague sits out, is fine. I don't really want to try to worry about Towns going up against Boogie.
Wiggins frustrated me last night. Started off hot, 13, 14 fantasy points in the first quarter, whatever it was, and then nothing.
I mean, that's Wiggins. Like,
It's
I mean,
true.
the usage is there, the shot attempts are there. He just has to make them. And like the Pelicans, not a great rebounding team, so you would expect maybe a few. He could fall ass backwards into a couple rebounds, maybe.
Let's hope so, because that's how he's going to get
that's
over
only,
it.
that's the only way he gets rebounds, anyways.
Let's move on here. Indiana, Houston, 224 total. Houston, double-digit favorites. Obviously, a great matchup for Houston. Indiana, the away team here. This one's interesting because I kind of want to say that Houston blows them out, and yet I don't even think that kind of affects some of these Houston guys because we've seen Harden play through blowouts before.
Yeah, like I mean, they're blowing everyone out, and Harden's still seeing like fourth quarter minutes when they're up by like 25 points. So I mean, 36 minutes, 37 over the last two. Those were pretty much blowout games. 32 against Denver, 36 against Memphis. Like all these are blowout games. Like they're trying to get Harden's conditioning up, and they're trying to get Chris Paul's conditioning up, and they're trying to get these guys used to rotations where they're splitting minutes, playing together, all kinds of these things that D'Antoni's doing. Like they're still going to get minutes in a blowout game.
Yeah, I mean, I think really Harden comes in as a guy you can certainly pay up for. I mean, you just look at his production. I mean, over 60 fantasy points each of the last two games. He's taken 13 3-point attempts in those two games. The rebounds have been up. I mean, really outside of the Knicks game, but that's kind of more of a Knicks thing given how good they are at rebounding. But I mean, the peripherals are kind of back up from where we saw earlier in the season when he was kind of notching like 45 fantasy points, and now it's just he's kind of back to being peak Harden.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting the free throw attempts. Everything else is kind of falling in line. I think I'd still prefer Westbrook, but man, I'm going to be tilting. Like, I would like to build around both of these guys if it's possible. I'm really afraid of fading Harden and like that. He's going to put up like another 20 points in the first quarter or something and have like 30 fantasy points at the end of the first. I'm going to be sitting there banging my head against my keyboard because I faded him in a matchup that is just really, really good. So I think if value opens up, I'm going to try to build around the two. I still think I'm going to lean Westbrook, but man, I'm going to be sweating Harden tonight because I think he could come out and put up a massive game.
Yeah. As far as other Houston guys go, Trevor Ariza, Ryan Anderson, some of these guys, I mean, just kind of hit or miss values. Like they're not the safest plays on the board, even though it's a pretty decent spot. I do like to target some of the bigs against Indiana. So like I don't mind Capella and GPPs because he's going to be overlooked. He's a little bit expensive, but I think that also kind of contributes to a lower ownership.
Yeah, I definitely like Capella. I think we have to talk about Chris Paul. Like price is starting to rise on DraftKings. It's actually, I think, coming down on FanDuel. He's playing over 30 minutes. The last two games, he's shot like 3 of 19, and he still managed to put up solid fantasy games, like over 30 fantasy points, like double-digit assists in 3 straight games. He's not turning the ball over. He's getting steals. Once that shot starts to fall, like you're going to see Chris Paul put up these, 40, 50 fantasy point games, and he's still a little too cheap. I think you probably want to take a shot on him in GPPs here because I think this could be a spot where he comes out and puts up a pretty big game. And you'll see him, like if this game does happen to stay close, like you'll probably see him get closer to 35 minutes tonight.
Yeah. In every game so far this season, he's had 2 or more steals. Like you're getting that floor, especially on FanDuel, 6 points right off the bat. Like Paul's always had that to his game. Yeah, I think he's a great GPP option. Like you said, price is coming up. people kind of look at the Rockets and just want to go with Harden and that's it and kind of log out. And that kind of results in lower ownership. And especially because you have a potential Curry game without Durant tonight, Lowry kind of in that price range, like Paul's going to be really overlooked.
It really is. And I think another underrated part of what Chris Paul is doing this season, like he's attempting a lot of 3-pointers, and that's not something that he has done a lot in his career. Like, I mean, last year with the Clippers, he averaged 5 per game. He's averaging 5 per game this season with the Rockets. But if you look, I mean, he has 2 games of his last 4 where he's attempted at least 7 3-pointers, and he shot 57% on those shots before missing pretty much everything in the last 2. Like, I think this is a spot where his shot starts to fall, and I would be afraid to not have some exposure to him.
Anyone else in Houston you like here?
You mentioned the peripheral guys like Tucker and Ariza. I don't mind taking a shot on those guys. I'm not going to go with Ryan Anderson here. We have the Ryan Anderson home road splits, which are a real thing, and I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah. I don't mind Ariza. He's always kind of a tough guy to figure out. Like, he does have a fairly low floor, but for a guy who plays 40 minutes, you kind of be surprised at his outcomes on some nights,
Yeah. I mean, the minutes are there for him most nights, so I don't mind it.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't mind Capella and GPPs. That's really it for me on the Houston side.
Yep, same here.
So, Indiana, obviously we've seen Victor Oladipo playing really well this year. Backcourt, I don't have a ton of interest in on this slate. I think Oladipo's in play for GPPs. Darren Collison, I'm not really on tonight. Indiana side, Bogdanovich, I guess I have a little bit of interest in at his price. I think he's another one I could consider.
I don't GPPs for Oladipo is fine. Like, that price tag is just ridiculous. He's up to like 8,400 on both sides. Like, I can't pay that much for Oladipo, but you can't deny the fact that he's been outstanding recently. So I don't mind going there. Obviously, we have to monitor the news. He's battling a knee injury. If he plays, like I said, you can go there in GPPs. Collison, again, another GPP option. You'd expect him to probably struggle with Chris Paul probably guarding him the majority of the time. Lance Stevenson, I don't think it matters if Oladipo plays. Like, the minutes are there for him. He's been shooting really well. When Lance gets hot, it's when you want to jump on the train and just ride it until the wheels fall off. He's still too cheap on DraftKings at 4,300 in a matchup like this. It's another spot where Lance could have a pretty big game. And if Depot does sit, like, you just lock Lance in and cheer him on as he takes like 40 shots and misses 30 of them, but still somehow manages to get like 35 fantasy points. Bogdanovich is fine. Don't chase Sabonis points, and I don't want to touch Miles Turner.
No, and I don't mind Thad Young here. He's been pretty decent of late, especially if Oladipo does sit for some reason. Obviously Thaddeus Young has seen about a 5% increase in his usage with him off the floor. At his price tags, 6K on FanDuel, 5,600 on DK. Like, I don't mind Thaddeus Young in this spot.
Yeah, I don't mind going there.
So, moving on here, Memphis, San Antonio, 195, your lowest total of the night. I don't have a ton of interest here, although I could have some interest in Tyreek Evans. You pointed out to me, I didn't even know Mario Chalmers was questionable coming into the night. Obviously they could be really hurt for guys in that backcourt.
Yeah, he's battling an ankle injury. Played 19 minutes against Brooklyn. Like, obviously we want to wait for news on that, but if he sits, like, Tyreek Evans becomes just an excellent play. 32% usage, 1.06 fantasy points per minute without Conley and without Chalmers on the floor. Would be an excellent spot for him. Who knows what's going to happen with JB Bickerstaff taking over this team. You would expect that, like, without Chalmers and without Conley, like, they have to lean on Tyreek Evans because Andrew Harrison is not an NBA caliber player. He's barely a G League caliber player, and you just can't rely on him. I would look at Tyreek if Chalmers sits, and I'm probably fading Memphis as a whole if Chalmers plays.
Yep, yeah, I'm on the same page with you there. Yeah, obviously Gasol, we've seen a higher usage, but tough spot for him really tonight. I'm not looking to go that way. His price tags. Yeah, I mean Evans is kind of really the only guy I'll have some interest in if the cards fall right. So on the Spurs side of things, kind of another one I don't really have a ton of interest in here. I mean Aldridge, I guess you can take a look at in GPP still. Cash game forward is probably still there even in the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind going there. I think the only other, like, you could make a case for like a Kyle Anderson or a Danny Green, but like I don't want to target Pau Gasol here going up against his brother. I'm just not really interested in hardly anything from this game.
No. Brooklyn, Dallas, two of the worst defenses in the league. A lot of potential here on the Brooklyn side. I mean, we're still monitoring some of these guys as far as the injuries go, except, we've obviously got a little bit of clarity. I mean, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson dealing with the ankle injury, Crab, those kind of open up things for other guys there.
Yeah, those guys are listed as doubtful. I wouldn't expect them to suit up. Damari Carroll should be good to go. He sounded pretty optimistic that he was going to play. So that's I kind of wish Carroll would sit, but that injury news definitely does open up a few things here from the Brooklyn side, and then a lot of interest in both sides of this game, to be honest.
Yeah. We'll start with this net side. When you kind of take some of the bigger guys off the floor, we've seen a lot of the usage rate kind of go to guys like LeVert. Kilpatrick's even picked up some obvious minutes. I still think when you look at it, like I still don't mind Joe Harris. I still don't mind LeVert, with some of the wings missing.
Yeah, both those guys are fine plays. I think I'm a little more interested in LeVert just because, I mean, he's been playing really well recently, shooting the ball pretty well. Went 0 of 5 from 3 against Houston. Dallas, not a very good defensive team when it comes to three-pointers. They're allowing opponents to shoot 37%, 38% on above the break threes, getting lit up from the corners as well. So I do like LeVert a little bit. I think Trevor Booker's the guy that I would have the most interest in, just because he's still really cheap and, again, has double upside pretty much every time he takes the court, and going against a team that has improved on the glass but still struggles to defend in the paint. They're allowing opponents to shoot almost 70% at the rim, so it's a spot where I think Booker could actually have a solid outing.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at Booker, like even when he has these random 20-minute games, not random, but when you expect him to play a little bit more, like he's still producing. So yeah, I don't mind him. Decent spot for Booker. At his price tags, I mean, he should be able to pay that off, and I expect kind of a little bit more minutes with Hollis Jefferson out, because obviously last game the 20-minute was probably due to the blowout.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Dinwiddie is a fine option too. I mean, he's still been just so good for this team in that starting point guard role. Like, the price is pretty elevated. He's $7K on FanDuel. He's $6,900 on DraftKings. I think he's a fine cash game option going up against Dallas, who cannot defend point guards.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And then we get to obviously the Dallas side. A lot of the interest for me here is with some of these guys that are playing heavier minutes, but also, I mean, Dennis Smith Jr., hard to ignore in this matchup, really at these prices. Usage rate still sky high. Like, I don't mind him, even kind of with the volatility that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, you mentioned the usage rate. It's right around 30% for Dennis Smith Jr. We know this is an excellent matchup. He's coming off, I mean, he had a decent game against the Spurs, and that's a very tough matchup. I mean, he played 27 minutes, 27 fantasy points. He's still shooting the ball a lot. Some of those shots aren't falling for him, but against a Brooklyn team that's allowing opponents to shoot freaking 46% or 47% from the floor, 37% from three, like, you would expect him to actually break out here. And he's a guy that I have a ton of interest in. And like, I really don't want to fade him in this spot. I think this is just a breakout game here for Dennis Smith.
Yeah, I'm with you. Also, I don't have, or I have some interest in guys like Harrison Barnes, Wesley Matthews, who play the higher minutes. JJ Barea is an interesting value on this slate. We saw him pop off last game, 39 fantasy points in 22 minutes. Like, he's been a guy who's kind of hovering around that 20 to 25-minute mark, regardless of injuries in the backcourt. So I don't mind him at his cheaper price too.
Yeah, I really do like Barea. Barnes is a guy that I wrote up today. Like, normally he's a guy that I would only recommend in cash games, but everything just lines up for him to have a massive game here against the Nets. They can't rebound. They can't defend in the paint. Like, Barnes should absolutely go off tonight. And if you're giving me like 36, 37 minutes of a 6K guy against the Brooklyn Nets, like there's no way I'm fading that.
You back on Dirk here? I mean, kind of let down game, obviously, against the Spurs. Still really cheap. Was starting to really come along before that. Obviously, a good spot for him, too.
Yeah, I would definitely take a couple shots on Dirk. I mean, he's 4,800. Price did come up, obviously, because of the matchup. But, I mean, he's probably got 28, 30 fantasy point ceiling here in the spot.
Yeah, so kind of safe to say, as usual, usually the opposing starting five is in play against Brooklyn.
Yeah, literally everyone in that starting lineup is in play, except like if they roll out some like weird starting lineup with like Maxi Kleber or something. Like I wouldn't go there. But yeah, like Wes Matt definitely a great option. And you mentioned Barea already. Like I would definitely get some exposure there too.
Yeah, really good game to target there tonight. Last game of the night, Golden State and LA. We're still kind of going to be waiting on some Golden State news. You don't expect Durant to play, even though obviously both we saw the videos, the pictures yesterday of both them practicing, but that's not changing you too much.
No, I still think they give Durant like another game off, especially in this spot. Like there's just no reason to rush him back. Like they're going to need him in the long run. Durant has a propensity to like he has issues with his ankles. So like I think they take the cautious route. The spread is only like 10, 11 points. So that leads me to believe that that Vegas is expecting one of these guys to sit, and I would lean towards Durant being that guy.
Yeah, we obviously Curry was a guy that we were keeping an eye on. I mean, his, obviously was just a hand bruise, nothing too significant. He comes back tonight. I mean, in the spot against the Lakers with his 39% usage rate with Durant off the floor, like he kind of becomes another great option up top at point guard.
Yeah, like if he plays, and I'm sure we would get news way ahead of lock. Like Steve Kerr's been pretty good about at least releasing news that these guys are playing or not. Not so good about who's going to be starting in their place, but well, that's another nitpick that I can say for another time. But yeah, like Curry, massive usage rate, massive production without Durant on the floor. Like if I'm trying to get in Russ and maybe another high dollar player and then Curry, it's going to be a little tough unless we get some value that opens up. But it's going to be really, really tough to fade Curry in this spot against the Lakers.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that you're kind of comparing is basically the fact that the Westbrook discount, right around about 1,400, 1,300 per site. So you get a little bit of a drop off from Curry or Westbrook in price, if it's not a ton. They clearly become top options at the position, and you just kind of add in the Harden, the Cousins. Like it makes for a phenomenal slate tonight.
Yeah, it really does. Like it's probably not hard at all to get Curry and get Westbrook on FanDuel or like fantasy DraftKings. Obviously a little bit more difficult, but probably still doable. That would be like my core play, like my core like roster construction building would be like Russ and Curry and Adams if we get news that Durant is out.
Yeah. And then obviously I think we can look at Klay Thompson, 28% usage rate with Durant off the floor. Always comes in a little bit lower owned, still overlooked. So he'd be another guy to take a look at. I mean, 7,400 on DraftKings, 72 on FanDuel. Not bad prices, a little bit expensive, but I think kind of for the matchup.
Yeah, it is a little pricey, but I mean, again, this is a spot where you would expect them to be able to put up a lot of points in a matchup against a terrible defense. So you could definitely go that route as well.
Yep. Draymond, any interest tonight? Good spot for him. Lakers, 29 defensive efficiency against power forwards. They turn the ball over. Like this is a good Draymond spot at pretty reasonable prices.
Yeah, I mean, every spot's been a pretty much a good Draymond spot recently, and he just hasn't performed. Like Draymond's going to have one of these like 10 point, 10 rebound, 10 assist, 5 steal, like massive games at some point. I don't mind plugging him in, especially on FanDuel tonight and building around that core as well.
Yep. And obviously, if Durant, misses time, any interest in some of the backup guys there, small forward.
Obviously, Omri Caspi, definitely an interesting option if Durant misses again tonight.
Yep. On the Lakers side of things, I don't have a ton of interest in some of these guys just because, I mean, obviously we saw Larry Nance come back in and play pretty well. It's kind of a jumbled front court. I mean, Brandon Ingram, I guess I can look at in the spot Durant's out. He'd probably be a guy that I'd take a shot on some GPPs.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind that. Like Nance's price is still pretty fair. Like this would be a great this is a great matchup for Nance. Like the Warriors transition defense is pretty terrible. Nance, one of the better players in the NBA in transition. Like he's excellent as a roll man as well. The Warriors struggle to defend roll men. Like we've seen Nance's floor get boosted by steals as well. He had 4 against the Clippers. Like we know that that Golden State at times gets careless with the ball and turns it over a decent amount. So like I think this is a great spot to take a shot on Larry Nance and GPPs. Ingram, it's a decent spot for him as well. I really like Randall tonight, like 5,100 on DraftKings. It's a great spot. We saw the minutes, 24 last game. I don't mind going there either.
Interest in KCP. I mean, playing really well of late. Guy who's going to get consistently high minutes. Tough spot here, obviously, against Golden State. But, I mean, in this type of game, like he should be able to rack up the peripherals even if the shot's not dropping. I mean, his DraftKings price tag of 5,800 is probably a little bit more intriguing for me in comparison to 62 on FanDuel. So I think I'd be looking at him too.
You can take a flyer in KCP. I don't mind taking a shot on Jordan Clarkson either.
Yep. We haven't talked about Lonzo Ball. Any interest there?
I'm always going to say Lonzo Ball is an excellent GPP play. Obviously, we know like he's just been terrible recently, but his price is starting to fall. Like he's down under 7K on DraftKings. He is 67. Yeah, he's under 7K on FanDuel. Like he seems to kind of get up for some of these games against big opponents. So I don't mind taking a shot here.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Obviously, it's been very volatile, but I mean, kind of as you expect from a guy who's shooting 30% from the field.
Yeah, I mean, eventually that's going to change. Like he's gonna have to start shooting better. So again, like take a shot in GPPs. It's completely fine. Like he has a massive ceiling here. So take a shot. He could be a guy that wins you GPP because I don't think a lot of people are going to go there tonight.
Yeah. That's it, man. Finally, 10-game slate wrapped up. Our usual question to kind of top things off here. We got to put a limit on top scorer here because there's just too many guys, I think. So let's go below 9K. Who's your top scorer?
Below 9K. Harrison Barnes.
Ooh, I like it. 9K. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Draymond. I think this is one of those Draymond pop-off games for like 50 plus.
I could see it.
So that's going to wrap it up for us here. You can head over to fantasycafe.com, check out our optimizer cheat sheets, of course, Brent's article that is coming up very shortly. See his top GPP picks of the night, and good luck.
Good luck.